Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hello there, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our webinar. I'm Jenny Bailey from the Agile Business Consortium. We're the not-for-profit member organisation who are leading, promoting and enabling business agility worldwide. So welcome to the Agile Business Conference 2019 webinar. This is actually the first one in our series. Now, the Agile Business Conference takes place in central London on the 25th and the 26th of September. It's a major two-day annual event which provides a single forum for everyone really who's interested in Agile. So come along and join us. There's more information on our website, which is agileconference.org. But I'm joined today by the partner of Agile Center, and today we're going to be looking at the 6 steps to high-performance Agile Organisations, and this is brought to you by Agile Center. So let's just go through and just do a tiny bit of housekeeping first. Before we introduce Karim to everybody. So this session is being broadcasted, so please be aware of that, and also we'd love to take your questions. So if there's anybody out there that would like to put some questions forward about the 6 steps to high performance Agile organisations, then please do put them in the question box there. Also, we love to hear your feedback. All feedback, very, very welcome. My email is there, so please get in contact with me and send your feedback through. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Karim Harbott. Now, as I said, he is the partner of Agile Center Limited. He is, well, goodness, he's so many things, in all honesty. He's an Agile trainer, he's an executive coach, he's a blogger, he's an international conference speaker. He's very, very knowledgeable about Scrum. He's a trainer and a coach, and he's over a decade of experience helping organizations with Agile. And he's worked on some of the most complex transformations across the world. From large financial service organizations to government departments and global consultancies. He's really worked on them all, and I can only imagine the kind of experience that he's gained whilst going through this process of his career. So welcome, Karim, and thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much. Well, thanks for having me on. It's great to be here, and nice, kind words as well. So I appreciate that.
Well, it's incredible. I was looking at your CV, if you like, or your bio, and my goodness, like I was saying, the experience that you must have gained going through those huge, complex transformations, Agile transformations that you've worked on out there and across the world as well. Is there one that kind of sort of overshadows some of the others that was so impactful to you?
I have to say they've all been incredible learning experiences for different reasons, and I think for some of them I've learned amazing things because of the things that we did really well and they were great. But a lot of them, it was the stuff we got wrong, and it's like, oh well, we definitely don't want to do that again. And so I wouldn't say there was one. I really enjoy the sort of the big sort of enterprise transformation stuff, and some of the big banks where we've tried to do that, not across the whole bank, but just in some small part of it, to really try and make that happen in an organization like that is one hell of a challenge. But small successes are really satisfying there. So I'd say some of those probably.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're saying there about the challenges, because obviously you've got to do some things wrong to get some things right, really, don't you, on that journey?
And by some things, you mean loads of things.
Possibly.
So I mean, yeah. So some of them are obviously things that I have looking back, thinking I wouldn't approach it in that way this time. But some of them are just watching people who are leading the transformation, who are obviously making these decisions, and you think, oh, okay, I'm going to strongly advise that people don't do that next time. So there's been a combination of my mistakes and my learning, but also just some of the people in those organizations, and then kind of you learn from each one of those, and you kind of come up with a set of patterns now that you think, okay, well, I think I've at least reasonably good fighting chance of helping people be successful after doing all this stuff. So yeah, it's great. We welcome the learnings at every stage.
Can you just share with us how you came across Agile, how it all started for you in this career that you've gained?
Sure. Well, I was a project manager. Well, I was actually a developer, but I was just kind of asked really as a project manager to go and do some Scrum mastering. Okay. I had no idea what that was. So sure, being me, I was like, give that a go. How hard could it be? turns out it's really hard. And nothing like project management. So I had to learn a whole new skill set. But the joy for me really was that I was struggling already applying traditional waterfall project management to software development. It didn't seem to work very well in the big organization. And when I tried this different way, it was one team, right? One team building one product. We tried working a different way. It was just an eye-opener for me, how amazingly effective it was. And so then I immersed myself in that to learn as much as I could about Scrum and Scrum mastering. And that was a kind of 5 or 6 year journey to being a Scrum master before I moved on to sort of coaching leaders and coaching transformations. And so it was an accident, but once it happened, I threw myself into it.
Wow. Fantastic. And you're still throwing yourself into a lot of stuff now because you're an exceptionally busy person, aren't you, there at Agile Centre? What's the latest? What's been happening there?
I do get around. Yeah, we so much. I mean, trying to balance conferences, speaking at conferences, trying to balance helping organizations to transform with teaching and building classes and new classes and trying to getting much more demand from around the world for these things. So there's a lot to juggle, and I guess trying to be disciplined with limiting my work in progress is as I teach others to do is helping there. But yeah, there's a backlog as long as both of my arms at the moment, which is great. Working the other way.
Okay, well, I guess we're on that backlog as well because you're actually joining us at the conference, aren't you? As you're a sponsor there, obviously, but you're also there on the Agile Tools session, aren't you? Providing a 45-minute presentation. On more of an in-depth look of the 6 steps to high-performance Agile Organisations, aren't you?
That's correct. Yeah, this is a taster session for that, if you like, and we're going to be there talking about this because over my many years of doing this, I feel like there is a load of domains that are being ignored, and that's a problem. So I'm trying to spread the word as much as I can and provide some guidance as to how people might look at these areas and apply some tools and techniques in them, I guess, is what we're trying to do there.
Okay, so tell me then, where do we start with this topic? Because I'm interested actually also to know that you've managed to refine it down to 6 steps because it's such a varied topic, 6 domains of agility, and we're looking at the domains of business agility and successful organizations. Yeah. How did you manage to get that down to just six steps? And it's probably not just 6 steps, but I'm curious.
Yeah, This has evolved over many years working with many big organizations, and when you're working on an enterprise transformation, you bump up against impediment after impediment after impediment because let's face it, lots of big traditional organizations are designed for a different era. They're designed for the Industrial Revolution era and a very different type of work. So when you start trying to operate with agility, what you find is there's a bunch of stuff in your way. And this came from trying to just get it clear in my mind, what are those areas that leaders need to address in order to really have a chance of success? And it turns out there's a lot of stuff. And I've had various iterations of this. Some things fit more neatly than others. Some things sit across all of them. People always ping me on LinkedIn and they say, okay, you're missing out this and that. And I'm like, yeah, you can't really pull out like the customer, for example. And so I don't mention the customer in there. It's like, well, if you can talk about the customer in terms of your org design, in terms of how you arranged the organization moving from silos to a customer focus, you can also talk about it in governance and funding. From are we funding work or are we funding products and value streams? And you can talk about it in a number of those different areas, ways of working, moving towards a more of a lean startup approach. So it's like, I can't pull that out. So it's gone round and round. And I settled on these 6 as key areas that A, are big blockers traditionally, but B, are often overlooked and ignored, probably because people don't realize that that's part of a transformation to achieve agility, because they see this as an IT thing. So I'm just trying to spread that message really. And over the years, I've refined it down to these 6.
Okay, fantastic. So let's look at then the case for business agility. And I mean, that sounds so familiar to me, obviously, because that's the theme of this year's conference, the case for business agility. Now, whether you put an exclamation mark on the end of that or whether you put a question mark on it, we're going to be really tackling that subject and that topic, if you like, at the conference. But just talk us through that.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, you can see the numbers there, but the highlights really. The world has changed dramatically in the last 20 or 30 years, and we've gone from a world that's largely predictable with enough planning and enough thought, not particularly volatile or changeable, to a world where we know more than we've ever known, and our ability to predict the future is worse than it's ever been. Right? I mean, if you look at these technologies, the things like the telephone, the 75 years to reach 50 million users, 35 days for Angry Birds. If you look at how one person setting themselves alight in a square in Tunisia can in 2010 can spark the fall of multiple leaders and presidents who've been in power for 3-4 decades.
Sure.
There's 3 or 4, and then Syria descends into civil war. Who would have known, right? And that is only enabled through technological change and through an interconnectedness of the world. We use the word VUCA a lot: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. That has gone sky high, and the rate of change in the world now is such that the problem is not how can we plan for something. The problem is how can we create an organization that can respond to any strategic challenge more quickly, more cheaply, or more easily than its competitors. And that kind of organization is very, very different to a traditional kind of organization, and that's what we're going to be talking about. It really is a case of survival of the most adaptive now, which is exciting.
So what's next, do you think, then? I mean, if we're all going to be adaptive and we're all going to be surviving and we're not going to know what's coming on, what's next? We're just existing and going to be coping admirably.
Yeah, I think organizations, the organizations that we successful are the ones that can respond to that unknown thing around the corner. It's no longer good enough to try to predict. Right? You've got to, in a sense, you've got to try and predict, but also you've got to respond very quickly when you realize your prediction hasn't happened. And I think we've seen Agile, capital A or small a, whatever you want to call it, evolve over the years, right? From 2001 and before that, because Scrum predates that, right? But you've seen the single team software development movement turn into multiple team software development and scale into true business agility now, spinning up new business units to create market generating innovations, spinning them down, moving this way and that way. And that's the organization of the future, and they're out there right now, and the more traditional organizations are trying to get a piece of that.
Okay, so let's go back to, let's have a look at the high look, if you like, of these 6 steps to high performance, because this is going to be a snapshot, isn't it, really?
That's a very, very quick snapshot. Like I said, I often spend 2 days talking about this, and we're going to do it in half an hour. So we'll do our best on this, right? But so here's what happens. Most organizations, they are trying to cultivate high-performing agile organizations, adaptive organizations, whatever word you'd like to use there. That's the aim, to create that kind of organization that can respond and that can survive and thrive in an uncertainty and complexity. Now, the way they choose to address the problem is often a slightly narrower approach than is needed. So they look at ways of working, and by this I mean the things that you see up there. We need some Scrum training, or maybe Lean, or maybe Safe, maybe all of these tools and techniques, ways of working, I call it. Right? And when I turn up on Agile transformations, whatever that means, but organizations who are trying to increase their agility, I see a lot of focus on these ways of working and frameworks and techniques and processes. And for me, that's useful, but it is a part and not even the biggest part of the challenge. Right? So a lot of my work is educating people. It's like, yeah, you should do that stuff. That's great. but the real big enablers or impediments, depending on how you look at it,
right,
that will truly unlock your agility are not on that page. All right, there are other areas we need to focus on, and too often they're being ignored. And I guess that's what we're going to be talking about today.
but are you saying the ways of working is one of the 6 steps, or not, or that's
It's
something?
one of them. Yeah. So
Okay.
I call them the 6. I call them the 6 domains. Ways of working is important. We need, because that's our process. That's how we work. So whether you're going to be doing Scrum, or you're going to take more of a lean startup approach, or you're going to be doing some other framework, tools and techniques, that's really, really valuable stuff. But what I find, especially when I teach this stuff, is people just say, yes, but I can't do this in my organization because, and that often manifests itself as, yes, but in the real world. And I'm saying, well, it's not everybody's real world. It's your real world at the moment because of the way your organization is designed.
Sure.
What you're not doing is looking at the other 5 domains, which have just appeared on the screen there, right? And when I speak with leadership, they're often surprised. I mean, conceptually, they know there are these things that need to be addressed, but they don't realize the level of change that's necessary to truly be adaptive. It's like the leadership styles, like how we lead, the organizational culture can be extremely aligned or not with agility. The organizational design, people of engagement, and how we govern and act the work, and how we choose to fund the work become increasingly important. So I guess we can just spend a small amount of time going through each of these in turn. I'm not going to touch too much on ways of working, because I think from a leadership perspective, the other 5 are more interesting.
Okay.
We probably there's a lot of literature out there in the Agile world about that. So this is the other 5, the forgotten 5, if you like.
Okay, no problem. I mean, the leadership and management, I mean, that and the culture, like you say, that has to be right, doesn't it? Because otherwise the transformation's not going to go anywhere. And sometimes you get a lot of resistance in that leadership and management sector, don't you?
Oh, for sure. You get a lot. And again, if you dive into leadership or management, like management was invented largely between about 1890 and 1920. People like Frederick Winslow Taylor, people like Henry Fail, people like Henry Ford and Max Weber, the pioneers here. And if you look at the context in which that was happening, right, this was large groups of people coming to work in factories, and they were low skilled, largely uneducated, and they were having to do manual, repeatable, menial work in that factory, right? And the challenge for management was to put it bluntly, how do we get these people to show up on time, do what we tell them to do, and then go home? How do we turn them into semi-programmable machines?
Yeah, sure.
And that was the problem they were trying to solve. And they solved it fabulously well, right? However, that approach largely prevails today. And if you look at the work being done today, as you know, a lot of it is not, I just described. A lot of it is creative work, a lot of it is creating new knowledge, a lot of it is stuff that's never been done before. It's complex. These are highly skilled, educated people, and we're managing them in largely the same way as we were 100, 120 years ago. So that is a massive mindset shift for lots of leaders and managers, to work in a way that is different to what's got them to that very successful position. And that is a big eye opener for people, I think.
Absolutely. And also at the moment, I mean, it's been termed that 16% of the workforce is engaged in their working operations at the moment. So
yeah, so we can kind of cover that on the people in engagement. Exactly, because if you are a creative, bright, intelligent person doing complex work, do you want to turn up and be disempowered and told what to do? And someone said, do this and do this and do this. I mean, I think depending on the numbers you look at, 15% globally, and it's worse in the UK. It's 10 or 11% in the UK. I think the US pulls that figure up with 33. So I don't know what they're doing, but they're doing something right. But it's bad. And if you look at, I will touch on this as one of the domains. If you look at the most effective organizations, what we see is time and time again, engagement is a leading indicator of success. Every metric, organizations with engaged employees outperform their competitors, right? And that's largely a function of the management and the leadership practices in place. You can really manage for engagement, or you can manage for compliance. And one's gonna help you be high performing and adaptive, and one isn't. So yeah, it's a big shift for lots of people, and it's not just the fact that they have to act differently. It's how do we do that? What are some tools and techniques for us? Because again, it's a step into the unknown for lots of them, and so coaching leaders through that is a really big part of what we do.
It's a great change as well, though, isn't it, for the employee side of things, or the talent support, because we don't necessarily call them employees anymore, do we? It's more talent support in the HR world now, isn't it? But I mean, it's so more empowering on that side of things. So you can come to
talent. Yeah, talent and mastery. I mean, thankfully, I say thankfully, we still sometimes hear people referred to as resources, but largely we're seeing that word disappear in that context, which is great. But you're right, it's about how do we get people to be passionate about what they do? How do we get people to be inspired? And how do we get people to grow their skills and develop? And it's a very different model if you're looking to grow people and maximize their potential and get the best out of them on all levels and their creativity. But it's HR policies, a lot of them that we see in organizations. For example, the annual performance review. I mean, just to give feedback on someone's performance on an annual basis. I mean, this is how long it takes us to go around the sun. But there's no reason for that to be aligned with when we give feedback on performance. It doesn't make any sense. We've got to give that fast feedback to people, just like we give fast feedback to our product when we're building it. Right? It's no different, and help people grow along the way.
I mean, let's face it, it's an iterative development, isn't it? You're working on a project, you're working something through, you're giving feedback. It's a process, it's a journey. Everybody wants and needs that feedback as they're doing it, definitely. It just makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, and real-time feedback to help them inspect, adapt, course correct all these things that we talk about, but we don't do it with ourselves and our goals. Like, why are we setting annual goals? Like, how can we do not plan beyond the circumstances you can foresee? That was Helmut von Moltke, Field Marshal from the Prussian Army, and that was in 1869. He said that. So he knew a thing or two about operating in uncertainty, and we're not heeding that right now with our HR policies in lots of big organizations. So there's a big transformation there with how we manage people and talent and growth of people.
Absolutely. I mean, that is one of the topics that we're discussing at the conference, because Pia Maria Thoren, for instance, is going to be joining us, and Agile HR is alive and kicking and very much happening out there at the moment. So that's definitely a place where Agile is growing. There's no doubt about it. And interest in that is growing as well. So, I mean, that's great things. It has to happen. Yes. It really does. Okay, fantastic.
It does. And her book is a very interesting read. I'd recommend reading that. Agile People, it's called, and I got a lot of good tips and techniques for the HR side of this transformation. Because again, it's one of the forgotten domains, and it's vital, because people, right? It's all individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Someone once said, right? So
that's right.
We
that's
really do need.
It's funny you should say about reading, actually, because I know you're an avid reader, aren't you, on all sort of these topics of these books. You've read a lot, haven't you?
I think I probably read. My wife might say too much around this area. I'll take a book on this stuff on holiday with me, which is probably not super healthy. But I find it so fascinating. I don't do it because I have to. I do it because I read a book and it points to 6 others, and I feel like I have to read them now. And it's so much. There's a wealth of knowledge in all areas, and not just in the agile space, but way beyond that. And tools and techniques we can bring in. I mean, beyond budgeting, for example, it's just one thing that I talk about in the governance and funding domain, is how to fund the complexity and uncertainty. And there's a whole world out there that is from the finance world, but it is as if an agile person had written it. It's this solving the same problems, but from the finance department's perspective. There's gold everywhere you go. There's great stuff. So I can't get enough of the books out there. I think it's it's a great thing to do, to explore and try and grow your knowledge around these areas.
Absolutely. A couple of things there. I want your 3 top books that we can put on a recommended reading list. If you can scale it down to 3, I'd appreciate that. We can do that on the follow-up email. So you've got a bit of time to think about that. That's fine. And the other thing, beyond budgeting, they're going to be joining us at the conference. So obviously we're going to be talking of that and their process and practice, if you like, how beyond budgeting works. Think Beate, the chairman, is actually going to be taking an Agile Tools session, and he's also very active in the workshop as well. And also Agile Finance is happening, and Agile Procurement is happening in a very big way as well. So David Kershaw is going to be joining us at the conference talking about that. So we've got these topics, and they're emerging in some ways, although Beyond Budgeting has been out for some time. But I know Agile Procurement is picking up huge momentum at the moment as it stampedes into the HR minds and into the procurement minds in a very big way.
For sure. I mean, this is Agile growing up and getting out of the IT department and into the boardroom.
I like that. Agile growing up. It is, yeah.
Well, it is. It's come of it. Well, it's just turned 18, right? So it's about time it grew up. Get yourself a real job now. But if you think about it, right? It is when Forbes are writing about Agile, when Harvard Business Review are writing about Agile, when McKinsey and BCG and Bain are talking about agility and Agile organizations and Agile in the enterprise, you know it's a thing. You know it's definitely crossed the chasm from people in writing software to whole organizational agility, and it's great. And this is when you bring in the finance department. Now the CFO needs to know about this, because one of the biggest blockers, I'll be honest, when I'm teaching Scrum, just plain old one team Scrum, people say to me, but we have to have a business case with the scope signed off, otherwise we won't get funding, and we can't change that scope. How can we be agile?
Right.
It's like, well, you can't both be fixed and be able to respond to change. They're literally the opposite to each other. So if your finance department aren't enabling this, you don't have a hope. And it's like who's talking to the finance director, who's talking to the HR director. Our organizational design, is it still siloed, or are we creating that network of interconnected teams, loosely coupled, highly aligned teams? Because this stuff needs to happen, otherwise we'll get very, very minimal gains.
Absolutely. And that collaboration, I mean, they all need to be talking to each other, don't they? They all need to be in the same room. That's such a strong point that came through from another conference I attended. It's like everybody in the same room and everybody needs to collaborate. So we're going to be doing a lot of that, I think, at the conference as well. In fact, the workshop that we're putting together, it's like 4 agile topics. So we've got HR and we've got procurement, and we've got beyond budgeting, and we've got culture, and it's one workshop in one room with everybody. So we'll see how that goes. But that's a first. I could have split them up and put them in different rooms, but I just thought, no, let's keep them together and let's see how this can work. So it's going to be good.
And you know what, Jenny, you make a fascinating point, because I mean I've split, and again this is just my view on the world of transformation, right? But I've split these things into 5 domains. But what I'm not trying to say is these things are addressed in isolation. They are. This is a highly complex, interconnected web of 6 different things which interact all with each other in multiple different ways that we can understand and multiple different ways that we can't understand. You cannot change your culture without changing leadership behaviors or org design or your governance or your funding policies, and you can't change ways of working without changing your HR policies, and like nothing is changed in isolation. So I love that you put those things in the same room, because they are not separate things really. They are separate aspects of the same thing, and this is the interconnected web that is an agile organization. So I love that. I look forward to that.
Great. Absolutely. No, I couldn't have said it better myself. And also, fundamentally, it comes down to people, doesn't it? We're not machines, we're people. And and we want to work together, we want to collaborate, and we all want to play nicely, really, I guess. And for the end result of the organizations that we're working for, we want to see results. So it's all about us coming together, and we have to. There's no other way. If you don't come together, nothing's gonna be achieved, and it's all going to go very backwards, very fast.
It is, but unfortunately, we're often prevented from doing the things that we all know is right. These organizational designs, for example, I mean, are people even in the same building? A finance and HR even in the same country, and it's like, well, we're designing a system whereby it's very, very difficult to get together and to collaborate. And so it's working against all of those things to bring people together, and it's just putting everybody out of their comfort zone, and their view of the world that they've known for the last few decades just stops being true, and that's difficult, and that really is quite, we have to remember that's scary for people. That is going to send our brain into a stress mode, which is not helpful. I mean, we move out of our prefrontal cortex into our limbic system. Suddenly our ability to think clearly goes down very, very quickly. Exactly. It's kind of the stressful fight or flight, and then we're in trouble. So we've got to manage that and manage people and bring them along, and provide psychological safety for everyone at every step. Otherwise, it's that resistance just comes back stronger than ever.
There's so many considerations to look at. There really are. Let's move on to organisational culture now, because that is another one of your 6 steps, isn't it?
It is, yeah. We're going out of order, but I think we'll go where the conversation tells us, and that's fine. So here, that doesn't matter really. We're kind of just talking through it all, cover all the points that we want to cover. This is the State of Agile report. It's the 13th State of Agile report from version 1, and I've taken this because the actual question they're asking here is the barriers, impediments to increasing agility.
Okay.
And every single year, the numbers change, but the number one impediment does not.
No.
The number one impediment is always organizational culture at odds with agile values. Now, that is almost certainly true in lots of organizations I work in. But the thing is, we know this as coaches, yet very few people have a plan to assess culture, never mind to know, given the culture we're in and where we want to be, what is an effective approach, right? And I think this is where we as an industry let ourselves down slightly, because we'll go into a very traditional control culture, and we will seek to have them work in a way that is misaligned with their culture and what they value, and so there needs to be a piece of education, and there needs to be a piece of, okay, what kind of culture do we want to create? Because some organizations have a very incremental approach to change, and some have a very revolutionary approach to change. But we go in with the wrong type. When we say we need to do Scrum here, it isn't going to land. So we need to think about what approach we start with, and is it aligned with their culture that they have or their culture they desire, and not have those two things at odds, because otherwise you see what happens when you try to apply this in their culture as a mismatch. It just doesn't land. They don't make the changes. So we kind of need to be a bit more planned about how we attack the culture piece and how we shift the culture should they wish to do so.
It's interesting as well that the second one there is resistance to change. I wonder if that's always been there under the first one as well. Those two have always been the tops.
Yeah, I don't would have to look back over the various years, but I mean, but the question is resistance to change because of what, right? I guess is the more interesting, the why behind that one. Why are people resisting the change? Often it's as simple as there are misaligned incentives, right? We are expecting people in teams to collaborate, share their knowledge with each other, but yet we're rewarding them individually for being better than everyone else. So yeah, they're going to be resistant to that, I'd say. Are we changing the policies or not? And if we're not, then we're just saying work differently, but we're not changing the system they're working in. Of course, there's going to be resistance. So we need to look at the incentives of managers, of leaders, of the organization, of people doing the work, and make sure that they're not misaligned and everyone's aligned. And do we even know why? What's the vision of this change? Like, what problem are we trying to solve? But that's but resistance is there. It's a very real thing. You feel that every day on the ground. So it's an interesting piece, the culture piece, and in shifting culture is an even bigger challenge.
Yeah, I mean, we've always known for some time there's a certain fear out there in the C-suite, isn't there, of large organisations. I guess they're being told, or there's a realisation that they need to change because there's disruptive forces all over the place, really, isn't there? And there's other organisations trying to take bite-sized chunks out of their market share as well. so that they're aware that very much the legacy organisations are, I think, are very aware that the customers are demanding a different set of values now, and they want them to work in a different way. And there's more ways whereby they're putting pressure on the organisation to change. Definitely.
And we're seeing it, right? But the thing is that just because people feel the burning platform to change, it doesn't mean they're comfortable with what that change implies.
Oh, absolutely.
Because there is a perceived lack of control when you move to this. But I mean, you don't have control anyway of a big organization. Certainly, you don't with a command, like a traditional command and control approach. What you have is a slight illusion of control. But actually, if you shift away from trying to control everything to intent, more of an intent-based leadership, more of a direction. This is what we're trying to achieve, and create the environment for people to self-organize around those outcomes with transparency. That's ironically going to give you far more control over hitting those outcomes, not over how the work is done, because I mean, do you care how the work is done? But the outcomes you're achieving as a leader. But it's difficult to let go, and that's why, you know, one of the tools and techniques I like is from David Marquet, the author of Turn the Ship Around, which is probably going to be in my top 3, right? And he talks about moving step by step on this thing called the ladder of leadership towards intent-based leadership. So you're not just going from having all the control to giving all the control, because that's scary. But there are steps along the way, asking people what they think they should do, right? Rather than just saying to check where there were gaps in either alignment or technical competence. Fill those gaps, give a bit more control. Expose more gaps, fill those, give more control, to the point where people are coming to you, telling you what needs to happen, and you just say, all right, yeah, do that, great idea. And again, that is not something that happens overnight.
No, absolutely not. Karim, I feel I could talk to you all afternoon on this topic. It's fascinating, and it's bringing up so many thoughts in my mind to kind of, you know, discuss as well and add to this. But the next slide is organizational design. Is that one of the 6 steps?
That's one of the 6 steps or 6 domains. I mean, I don't want to imply this is a sequential thing, as in you do one, then you do the other, because you do them all. But yes, it is one of the 6 domains, and yeah, this is huge, honestly, because if you are, you know, Deming talks about, you know, the performance of a system is 85 to 95% down to the system design, and only 10 to 15 or 5 to 15% or so down to the individuals operating in that system. Which, if you think about it,
wow.
I'll just give you a quick analogy. Like, let's just say you have a team of people on an oil tanker, and you have another team of people on a flotilla of speedboats, and you're saying, right, you need to turn around quickly. Right? Well, I don't care how good you are on that oil tanker, you're not going to turn around as quickly as a flotilla of speedboats, because they are designed for agility. Right? So if your organization isn't designed for this, then you don't really stand a chance. Again, it's like the governance thing. You are blocked. If you are a siloed organization that has a traditional org chart where information flows up and down and people aren't talking to each other, there's going to be no way that you're adaptive enough to be nimble. And so actually changing the organizational design, just breaking down those silos, having interconnected teams, the network, as we call it there on the slide. So this is largely borrowed from David, not David Marquet, the other military leader, General Stanley McChrystal's book, Team of Teams. You see, you learn a lot from the military when you're talking about agility, because no one operates in more complexity or uncertainty than them. But this is kind of the transformation that he went through out there whilst trying to fight Al Qaeda in Iraq, and realizing he wasn't adaptive enough, that his organization was too slow to respond. But we see this, that it's a perfect analogy to what we're doing, moving from the siloed hierarchies to the cross-functional, cross-component feature teams collaborating with each other to build a product. It's no different. The synergy is entirely there. But without those organizational changes, again, it just becomes almost impossible to collaborate, because people aren't together, they're not collaborating, they're not talking to each other, they're not incentivized to do that. Right, and so yeah, this moving from a functional focus to a business outcome focus is key here.
I love your analogy as well. The oil tanker, and then you get the flotilla of speedboats. I mean, it's just so clear. It's clear as crystal. It really is. It's perfect. Okay. I mean, there's a lot, like you say. This is a huge topic, isn't it? Organizational design,
Yes,
from a startup
it is.
organization right the way up to legacy organizations and the massive organizations out there as well. So obviously you go in and you help with this organizational design element if when you're looking at transformations, because it's a
Yeah.
complete transformation, isn't it? It's not just a part transformation. It takes on the whole organization.
Well, it does, but of course you probably, especially if you say you're taking on a one of the big banks, so you're not likely to do the whole organization. You will do
Part of it.
you will break out products, right? Sort of 4 or 5 teams working together to build a product and do it incrementally in that way. But what you can't do is keep your people. Oh, well, I'm in the business analysis team, and I'm in the engineering team, and I'm in the testing team, and we are in our own separate. Like you can't do that. So what you'll do is you'll get everyone out and you'll mix them all up, and you'll say, no, you are now a team that delivers value against this product, because ultimately that's what you're doing, right? I don't care how good your testing services are, but actually you want to flow value through the system. So yeah, for sure, it's one of those things where this is very disruptive. This is changing the org chart, right? And this is disruptive because each of those little boxes over there will have a manager associated with
Exactly.
it, and they'll have a budget associated with it. So again, you are challenging the status quo like to the core, really, and it's big uncertainty and change for people to recognize that is very difficult to do. And so for sure, which is why you don't try and do the whole organization at once, unless of course they are of the kind of culture where they go in for that kind of change. But mostly it's going to be traditional conservative organizations. So call it an experiment, take one area, one product grid, one value stream, one customer journey, with multiple teams collaborating against that, prove the concept there, and then roll that out. And then over time, those hierarchies will dissolve, but it's not a quick or easy process.
No, it's a journey, isn't it? It's a journey, and it's iterative. And like you say, you take one part of it and go through that process and see how it goes, and then retrospective and all that sort of stuff. It's fun though, isn't it? It's great to see results, and when it works, it must be so rewarding.
Nothing and very few things unlock the kind of results than changing the org design here. It just really makes everything fall into place. Because of course, if you're using something like Scrum kind of implies you have to do this anyway, right? You have a cross-functional team, right? But that sounds so easy to say. It is easy to say, but being an organization with those silos, that's actually almost impossible to do unless you take people out of that. But it's kind of, you don't really consider the organizational design challenges of trying to implement Scrum, but they are big, especially if you're doing it at scale. And this is when we start bumping up against this stuff. So yeah, it's hard, but it is a key enabler.
Absolutely. Okay, well, the next one we're talking about is people. So we've got people and engagement, and I kind of feel we've touched on this already, haven't we? When we were talking about engagement. Definitely
touched on this. Yeah, but I mean, I just I want to say there are 2 reasons for me why this is really important. It's if you look at those figures, right? By engaged, so this is from the Gallup poll. Gallup surveys tens of thousands of people around the world in about 135 different countries, and it comes up with this report every couple of years. 2017 is the one. I must have lost my attribution somewhere for those numbers, and it is from the Gallup State of the Global Workplace report, which you can download and view if you want. Now, the thing here is they define engaged as really cares about the work they're doing and the organization they're doing it for, right? Actually cares. Not engaged is, no, I don't care really. I'll turn up and I'll kind of stay the hours I'm going to stay, but as soon as 5 o'clock hits, I'm out the door and I'm not thinking about work, and I probably was on Facebook a little bit, and it's that kind of person. And then not that kind of behavior. And then you've got actively disengaged, which is I am looking for a new job. I am out. I have mentally checked out. Right? And if you look at this, you've got 15% of people who are engaged, globally, right? And like
Yeah.
I said, Western Europe, that number is closer to 10 or 11. So if you look at that, so two reasons why this makes me sad. One, if I've got young children, I've got two little girls. They will have a job one day, as terrifying a thought as that is, but they will be in employment, I hope, right? And the chances are they're going to be in either that pink or that blue section, right? The chances of them being in that green engaged section are really quite low from this stats perspective. And to think they're going to be doing that for 40 years of their life, I think people deserve better than that, and organizations in which they can be engaged. But this is a business problem, as I mentioned earlier, because on almost every metric, organizations with high engagement outperform their competitors. So if you are not touched by the human reason for this, you should be touched by the business and financial reason for this. It's like it's just good for business to have high engagement, but of course you've got to manage for engagement, and a good way to start is to track engagement. Lots of organizations don't.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is quite a startling statistic there, isn't it? But and like you say, it's higher. It's higher in the UK than what it is in America as well. So in terms of the
disengagement is higher. Yeah. It's I don't know why. I'd love to know what they're doing better out there. Maybe some Americans can send some reasons in for why they've got 33% and we're languishing down here in the low teens.
Okay, well, that's something for us all to debate and work out where we are. I know exactly where I am in that. So, and you definitely know where you are because you speak with so much passion, and we're both enthralled by this whole topic and making a difference and helping organisations. So, I know we're completely engaged in this. But yeah, you do
probably a bit too much.
Yeah, possibly, possibly. Okay, so the next one then is governance and funding. That's governance and funding. You put those two together. That's interesting.
Yes, indeed. And again, these have split and come back together, but I think they're so closely aligned. People often, I don't want to pick on poor old PMO, but people often blame PMO when they make us do this. PMO just enforcing the rules that someone else has set.
Absolutely.
Right, for a start.
Yeah.
So I understand that they can appear to be an impediment, but it's not PMO that's the impediment. It's the governance policies. It's the whole governance structure that is the impediment. They just happen to be the enforcers, if you like, of the thing that's the problem. So yeah, how we spend money. I mean, I mentioned earlier that I often get that, well, we have to have a business case. I mean, how many organizations still work around projects with business cases, which imply you have to know upfront what you're doing, what the benefits are, what the costs are, which means we have to have big, long analysis phases to work that out. And then, of course, as a delivery person, you are now tasked with following and executing that plan, and there's more of a focus on executing the plan and staying green and not going red than there is actually, are we delighting the customer? This is very much around, you know, customer collaboration over contract negotiation. If you've got yourself a business case and a scope and change control, how do you inspect and adapt? How do you course correct based on feedback? The answer is you don't. So we've got to go right back to how we invest, from moving to fixed scope and with business cases to running multiple experiments, more of a venture capitalist approach of, I'm just going to give all of these ideas a little bit and see what you can do with that. Come back, validate, use an MVP or some way of validating your idea, design an experiment, observe how your customers behave, come back, maybe we'll give you some more money, go and do some more stuff. Sorry, but you didn't prove that there was demand for that, so we're not going to give you any more. It's about spending and placing many small bets and in constantly course correcting rather than trying to get it right with a big first pass. Yes, there's your 10 million, go away and deliver this. Oops, you didn't deliver value. Right, and it's a massive shift for a big organization and a big finance department who may or may not have a background in innovation and in software and product development and these things, because they're classically trained finance people in business cases and internal rate of returns and these things. And again, we're not bringing the CFO in along with the journey, then it's kind of good night again, really, if we don't focus here about how many agile coaches really speak to the CFO, right, and help them understand how they could enable our way of working.
You say about that good night scenario because I mean there's stats out there, isn't there, in terms of agile transformations that are successful as well, aren't there, or that aren't successful, and obviously
Yes.
there's lots that's getting in the way because it's fairly high, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, depending on where you look, the numbers are different, but mostly they're not successful.
Mm.
If you want to put it that way, like a vast majority are not successful, but then the vast majority are focusing on one of these
Yes.
6 domains, and that's ways of working. It's like we trained everybody in insert your favorite framework here, and then why isn't it working? And it's not going to is the answer because until people really get this is a business-wide transformation. This
Yeah.
is business-wide change to achieve business agility,
Hmm.
and it isn't just switch one engine out for another engine and expect the car to be high performing. It's not quite
Absolutely.
going to work that way.
Yeah, that's right. It's another great analogy. I was thinking of a sticking plaster on the same sort of thing, but absolutely.
Yeah, or the
Yeah,
spray paint. It's
yeah.
not. It's not. It's
We
just
could go
with the
on.
root causes.
No,
We
that's
could,
right.
but we won't.
No, we won't. We'll have to bring it to a close very soon. But yeah, it is quite a startling statistic, and it really is. And obviously, um, there's so many things. There's so many. It's so complex when you look at a transformation, especially an organizational transformation or a part transformation. And so, we're here and trying to help organizations to get it right, aren't we? We really are.
Yeah, and so the final thing to say really is when I walk into an organization and I ask who's driving this
Mm,
and no offense to this role, but if I see like a development manager or a kind of a team manager and say we're leading this, and unless I see somebody who has the authority to
mm,
either change or influence change
mm.
in all of those domains, I think, well, this is going to be one hell of an uphill battle, if as close to impossible as something can be without actually being it. Because that, like, I don't know, I've never met somebody at that level who's been able to influence the CFO and influence the HR director and influence the whole way the organization is designed, which often goes right to the top, right?
Sure,
And that's
absolutely.
where the change. I don't even say that we need buy-in from senior leadership. I say we need them to actively drive it. That doesn't mean that it is done to people. Of course, they're brought along, but you have to make those big changes, and that comes from C-level. It has
Mm,
to be driven by C-level, which means C-level have to understand the case, the business case, the imperative for agility, for adaptiveness, for responsiveness, whatever
mm,
word you choose. They need to really, really feel that burning platform. And if they don't, then they'll delegate it to someone else, and you'll be knocking on locked doors for for months on end. And so that's kind of step zero. Do we have the right person driving this change, and are they really, really bought into what has to happen to enable it?
So, do you believe the message is getting out there then on this sort of thing? The top-down method, and the C-suite have got to be on board with this to make this happen. Is that message resonating out there?
I think it's beginning to resonate. It's beginning to resonate. Like I said, when you've got the most sort of respected publications for business leaders
Mm,
talking about this. Now, my fear is they're starting to understand the imperative for agility, but they still don't quite know what the steps necessary to achieve it. They still think it's something they can delegate to the CIO or the IT director or lower that. They think they can just go do your agile thing, right? And so my energies, if you like, are in trying to spread the message of this is painful, this is disruptive, but if you don't, then
mm,
it's going to be very difficult for you to compete in the medium and longer term. So here's the stuff you need to take into account and go in and decide whether that's for you. And if it is, I can certainly help you on that journey. If it's not for you, then that's okay. There's plenty of other people who want to do this. So I think there's definitely the imperative is getting through. Whether this message, the stuff we've been talking about today, is getting through, well, I'll keep fighting the good fight. But I think we've got some work to do on that.
absolutely. No, I agree with that. Also, I like your line on Agile Center, challenge your thinking. I mean, that's
Mhm.
that's very agile in so many ways, isn't it? It's like the status quo doesn't need to exist. You can change it, you can challenge it, you can adapt, you can be
Yeah.
responsive.
Yeah, so one of our core values is question everything, right? And we live by that. Like, oh, in the way that we're operating, it's like is this the best way we could be doing this? But also, organizations, when you ask them, so why do you use projects? Why do you fund projects versus funding products? And the answer tends to be this, just how it's always been done. So why do you arrange yourself like this? Because that's how we've always done. But actually, if you ask the question, mostly they don't know the answer.
Sure.
Because it was a decision taken many generations ago.
Yes.
And they've inherited it. But actually doesn't mean we shouldn't ask the question, because many generations ago, the world looked very different to how it looks today. So
yeah,
we should constantly challenge our assumptions and ask ourselves, are we doing this as effectively as we can in all areas?
Well, that takes us through the 6 domains then, doesn't it? Or the 6 steps, like you were saying. That was the snapshot version, the sprint version, as we can call it, really. But it's a fascinating roundup, really, to look at that. And I know with your Agile Tools session at the conference, you'll be going into a lot more depth, and you'll have a little bit more time there as well to actually present that to everybody around your table. But I think there's so many questions that can be raised from there. There really are, and we're probably running out of time for questions now. And there are a few questions that are coming through. So what we'll do is I'll put these questions to Karim, and if you're happy to answer them, and then with the follow-up email that's going to be going out, we can put some answers in there. That would be great. So don't feel your questions are going to be ignored. They won't be. So send them through, and no, exactly. We will answer them. We always like to keep discussions flowing here. We really do in our webinars. So yes, it's very interesting about challenging your thinking, asking the why. That's very Simon Sinek as well, isn't it? Asking the why, the what, the how. And we're going to be doing.
We should always start there, as we know.
We should indeed, absolutely. And we're going to be doing exactly the same as that, really, at the conference. We've got so many things happening. We've just confirmed our 9 case studies now, which are featuring real life challenges and learning points. They're going to be announced in the next week. We're going to be adding them to the website very soon. Our second keynote is, I'll see if you can guess this one actually, and we haven't announced who they are yet, but they are the largest Agile transformation that's out there currently. And they've got over 75,000 full-time staff, I believe, as well, and quite literally millions of customers. So do you want to hazard a guess, Karim, who our second keynote could be?
Oh wow, largest Agile transformation out there. Well, I know back when I was there that the largest Agile transformation going on was Barclays, but I don't know if that's still the case. I can't. You've got me on that one, Jenny. You have to help me out.
That's okay. Well, I can't tell you yet, anyway. But that's going to be announced very soon. So.
It was just a teaser. Just a teaser. We're gonna have to leave on that cliffhanger there.
I think you're in the right realm, though. In all honesty, think financial institutions, massive financial institutions, and you're there definitely.
Potentially the one with the horse. Then we'll see.
But we're delighted to we're delighted to have them with us, definitely. So yes, there's an amazing keynote that's going to be coming through from there, which we'll be announcing very soon. So there's lots of learning, lots of active learning and experiences to be had at the conference. You're going to be joining us for the Agile Tools session, as we've already said. So Karim, thank you so much for sharing all this amazing information with us today and going over these 6 steps to high-performing Agile organisations. It's been thoroughly inspirational, I think. And I know this was a snapshot, like I say, but it was there were so many questions in me that I was raising and instances and research, and that we could add to this conversation. I feel that we could just go on for another 3 hours at least, and it would be incredible.
Oh, well, I definitely could.
Yeah,
and I wouldn't even blink. So
we're similar.
Fascinating to me. So yes, we're probably best that we don't. But we will continue the conversation in September at the conference, and hopefully lots of people will be joining us there. We can widen the debate.
We shall indeed, absolutely. So Karim, thank you so much again for your time. Please do, though, remember your recommended reading list to us, those 3 that you were going to do. Send them through to us, and I'll send that out to everybody. I think one of them might be Turn the Ship Around, from what you were saying. The second one
I'd give you
Team of Teams, possibly.
Team of Teams, General Stanley McChrystal. Yeah.
Possibly.
I mean, those 2, absolutely. One is about leadership and how one man's growth in his leadership style. One is about organizational design, but in such a fascinating world that is so removed from ours, and so they cover leadership and they cover org design, and I'll have to have a think about the third one, which domain I want that to come from, because making me pick 3 is cruel, but I'll think of it.
We have to refine it. I couldn't let you put 100 there. That just wouldn't be fair to everybody listening. So top 3 would be great for now. And then maybe when they meet you, you can have another list on you handy.
Yes, okay. I've always got lists. Well, thank you for having me, Jenny. And it's been I've enjoyed the discussion, and so I look forward to September, where we can dive deeply into some of this stuff.
Absolutely, we will do. And thank you again, Karim. Okay, so that leaves us to say thank you to everybody for joining us today from across the world. So we really do appreciate your time coming through and listening to our webinar today. There will be more webinars in the run up to the conference. Obviously, the conference is the 25th and 26th of September, and more information and tickets on group bookings and all that sort of thing can be found at agileconference.org. But from me for now, I look forward to chatting to you again soon, and take care, and bye-bye.